So I am a QA manager at Atlassian, specifically for the Trello product. I've been there 3.5 years. I have done a lot in the quality area, and before that, I was into Unix and Linux system administration. But you can get all that from my LinkedIn if you're at all curious. So these are different ways to reach me. I do ask a lot of questions, and if I'm presenting this material from my experience, if your experience is different, or if it's the same, I love to hear feedback. I love to learn. So please feel free to let me know what you think. Okay, so with that, so in Mike's excellent talk, we were talking about testing from kind of the crime perspective, and now we're switching gears just a little bit into the horror film genre. So I think that still kind of works with the ID channel. It's just fact versus fiction. Okay, so a false sense of security is the feeling of being safer than one really is. A false sense of quality, as I define it, is a feeling of quality being better than it is. When you have a product and you think that it is fantastic and it is doing all the things that it should be doing, but it's not, and you just don't know about it. That's kind of that false sense of quality. We're doing all the things, everything should just work, and really kind of going into the details on that. Okay. We are going to talk a bit about exploratory testing, test automation and tooling and other things. But the first thing that we're going to talk about is the end all be all 100% everything automated goal, right? I'm sure everyone has heard that we need to automate everything, and then quality will be amazing and awesome, and we may not even need testers. I mean, we've automated all the things, and so we have crossed that off the list. Can I get in chat an idea if folks have heard the 100%, we need to automate 100% of the testing quote? I promise there's not that much interaction. It's only a little painful. Thank you. Okay, so we need to automate all the things. Turns out automation is not really a silver bullet. Basically, automation is hard. It's expensive, and there's not a one-size solution for everyone. And basically, look at it this way: if you could automate all the things, and then products would be perfect, I think we probably would have already heard about this. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a huge proponent of test automation. Test automation, though, is a tool. It doesn't take the place of your quality processes. It doesn't take the place of your testers. It doesn't take the place of devs testing. It doesn't take the place of product asking really hard questions about behavior. So automation is just not a silver bullet. Yes, use it where it makes sense. Use it where it's valuable. Use it, but you have to revisit it. You have to be okay with throwing things out. You have to be good with changing out frameworks, making your test cases better. I think it is far better to have fewer test cases that you really believe in and that are really valuable than thousands of test cases that are regression testing and people just think that it's flaky or they don't have confidence in them. Do what is valuable, not just what you've been doing or just not what you've been led to do. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about test automation, but first we're going to pivot and we're going to talk about exploratory testing. So I have recently started taking the words manual testing out very recently, based on this really great presentation that Michael Bolton did. And so I'm just going to call it exploratory testing, because the thing is, what we do is test. It's the discipline of test. It's not manual testing versus automated testing. I'm paraphrasing. That is not my own idea. It is brilliant, and I love it. But just to be clear, I did not come up with that. So Manual testing, it's not manual testing versus test automation. It's we're testing a thing, and what tools, what skills, what thought do we give to testing this thing? And that is a much stronger statement, and it's also a lot easier to explain to folks outside of the test discipline, because if they see things as manual versus automated testing, I think they're missing out on this whole, what the goal of the exercise is. So the value of exploratory testing. Humans are so good at asking questions. They're curious. Some of the best testers I know also are the same ones that break conference registration forms when they're registering for a conference. They're the ones that go in and they're making an order for delivery, and they'll tell you all the special characters that aren't allowed in forms, or they'll be able to tell you, oh, this one I could only write these 5 words, but I really wanted to write 20 words. Or like, oh, I tried to cut and paste Bitmojis into my lunch order. They're curious. They want to know how something works. They want to know what the boundary conditions are. Under what condition does it work? Is this intuitive? Which is one of my favorite questions. Do people just know how to interact with a piece of software or a piece of hardware? Or do they need to read an entire instruction manual? So testers, as they're exploring and experiencing whatever it is that they're testing, they're asking these fantastic questions that no one else is looking at it holistically like that. They try new things. They're not bound by, oh, this is how it works, happy path. They're going to say, oh, okay, well, what if I'm a different user? Or what if I use all uppercase? Or what if I get to this, if I go to this screen first instead of that screen first? They're great at thinking and adapting. So if you've done exploratory testing in one area, you apply those learnings to other areas, whether or not they're similar or not. Or if you're exploratory testing in a specific area, the second time around, you're going to use what you learned. And that's pretty significant when you talk about what makes testers more and more valuable throughout their career. It's that experience, because the first time you go down a certain path, it might take you 2 hours to like figure it out and understand how it works. And then the next time you're doing something similar, it might take 10 minutes. So yeah, originally it was a really long effort, but because you know more, you are able to get somewhere faster, and it's super valuable. Your skill set is always getting better and better with more questions, with more experience, with more exploring, and then breaking things on and with purpose. So everyone knows the tester personality type of like, test it to break it. I always have to say though, with empathy, it always has to be with empathy, because when you're breaking something, it's something that someone spent a lot of time on and probably significantly cares about. So yes, we break things so that we can help make things better. But I always have to kind of add the with empathy there. So exploratory testing is super valuable. So this is one of the most crucial steps to getting rid of that false sense of quality. Because when you do exploratory testing, when you ask questions, when you break things, when you try new things, these are all laying that foundation of whether or not it's solid, whether or not the thing that you're releasing is going to generate a whole bunch of not so great feedback because of XYZ. Without this piece, it's kind of like when you're baking a cake, you need to check the middle to make sure that it's fully cooked. That's part of what exploratory testing does for us, because the happy path could work or the automated test might run, but it's when you start changing things and trying different things, you really get a sense of robustness and intuitiveness. And does it make sense? Does it fulfill the requirement, but also is the behavior the expected one? You get the idea. And software testing is a discipline. Now, I know this chart is kind of an eye chart right here. If you do want a copy of that, you can reach out. It's taken me a long time to do this, but it goes back to Mike's mind mapping. This is my favorite mind map that I've worked on. These are tester skills. There isn't any other role within software that I've been in that has such a rich skill set in terms of, again, holistic. But if you look here, there's anything from product, DevOps, development. Then you have things like user groups. You have expertise like deep down in different pieces of software. Like think about like bug tracking, defect tracking. There's documentation. As a tester, some of the projects that I really liked was actually verifying technical documentation. It told me how to do something and I'd follow the steps. And that was fantastic. So as a tester, you have all of these areas that you can grow skills in that are totally relevant to what you're doing every day. And to me, that's super exciting. There's things in triage and support and, mobile, web, desktop, like depending on there are just so many options. It makes me, I've always been excited to be in tech and I loved systems, but there is something about test that makes me excited to go to work every day. And it's things like this where I can go and explore all these different things. And again, this goes back into, I can look at it I can look at a product or a feature from all of these different perspectives. And again, it gives you that strong foundation of what's expected, what's our quality bar, what's our quality level like right now, what are the pain points, and you can kind of move between all of those things, and it makes a better experience for your users. It makes a better experience for everyone. So I promised we'd get back to automated testing. So machines are really good at a lot of things. And this doesn't even include all the really exciting things that are happening with machine learning and AI. There's just some amazing testing tools that you can use. But for this example, we're going to keep to more like the test case automation scenarios. So executing repetitive tasks is really expensive to have someone do repetitive tasks if they're not very valuable, especially when that very valuable tester brain could be better spent doing exploratory testing. So is a task repetitive, and does it lend itself to being automated? Can we, so for example, are there hooks in the code that we can use to build really robust automation? And if not, how expensive is that? And kind of going through those things. Machines are really good at remembering. You tell a system, a framework something, and it's going to keep doing that same thing. Humans can be less good at remembering depending on the human. Consistency. Machines are going to do it the same way every time unless your tool actually accounts for that. Again, it's an exception. But in general, it's going to consistently do something. And sometimes, in order to get to the quality level you want that consistency. You want to make sure that these 3 paths are executed the same way every time, because 90% of our users go down that path, for example. Or email verification is required. So we want to make sure that this happens and this happens and this happens all in the same order. So awesome. Those are great uses for automation, and they're less exciting for people to do and less valuable for people to do. Reporting. Machines can communicate lots of data and facts to us, which is great. And then we need humans to roll that information up into something interesting, something that people understand. But at a very basic level, dashboards and things like that are super valuable when you're trying to build out like how good something is. Again, you can't, it chips away at that false sense of quality because a thing, it's on the dashboard, it's right there. So regardless of whether it's trending in a good direction or not good direction, you're always aware. So it makes it unignorable. And then precision testing, kind of like consistency, but the example here is I am very bad at pixel by pixel comparison. I am not going to be able to tell you that this pixel is off from this pixel if I'm comparing 2 things. I know testers that are really good at that, and they can tell you that. And it's a very valuable skill set. but you can't rely on everybody to be in that level. So precision testing, like visual testing, is a great candidate for automation because it's expensive for humans to do. It's very error prone depending on level of experience, attention to detail, and it's kind of an easy thing to make mistakes on, depending on how precise the area is that you're looking at it. Okay, so next, test automation pitfalls. The goal to automate 100%, if that is your only goal, it's not a good goal because your goal isn't quality. Your goal is 100% automation. You have to choose between one of those two things. One of those things is more important than the other. I know where I come down on this particular one, but yes. So if your goal is 100% automation, I would question whether or not you've actually thought about your quality level, or if you're trying to chase something for the reason of setting a goal. Implementing all manual or all automation, the all or nothing approach. Testing is amazing because it is this open area where everyone brings their own experience, their own education, their own interest and curiosity and everything to testing. And so you can imagine that in some cases, that's going to lead you down roads where people may be more inclined towards one tool or one way of doing things, and collaborating means that you get to experience all different ways of doing things. So if everything is one way or another, you miss out on the value that the all around value. And again, if you don't allow for lots of different ways to test quality that are measurable, then you fall into that false sense of quality situation, because you're kind of assuming that, oh, we're not doing a thing, so we don't actually know what's there. So if you do all automated, you don't know what exploratory testing would show you. There's no asking about behaviors or whys or those types of things. And if you don't have any automation, then perhaps you're tying up your testers with some less valuable things where they could be putting their very important tester brains into exploratory testing or regression testing, or coming up with test cases for test automation, or doing other things. And then trying to do too much too quickly. Whew, yes. A lot of times when people start automation, they're like, yeah, we're going to have a couple hundred test cases. It's going to grow and grow and grow. No, start with one test case, two test cases, build them solid. It goes, you want it to look more like Jenga, like the solid version of Jenga, versus like, let's just throw all the blocks together and hope that something holds together. So start small. Start small and build robust test automation, things that people can be confident in. And then not involving testers, and at least determining the test cases. That's a big pitfall. Even if your testers aren't doing the automation themselves, they'll let you know what the valuable test cases are. And I think that it's really important for dev and test to work together on test automation, because you lose the perspective of test if it's just development. And if it's just test, well, I certainly think that test benefits significantly from having developers help with test automation and coach and advise on things like that. So I think in the best case scenario, you have representatives from both dev and test, at least, and not revisiting test cases. It's hard to make decisions to remove or update test cases, but you can't assume that your test cases are going to be set once and they're just going to be awesome forever. That's just not how it works. So making sure that you go back and evaluate, you throw out test cases that don't work, you add new ones that do. If you had a brand new feature and 2 years later it's still in the it's still being regression tested, but you haven't changed it in 2 years, well, you might not need like an hour-long regression test suite on something that the code path hasn't changed in 2 years. And then have a changeable plan. Everything is living, breathing, evolving here. You're going to see that later on in slides too. Other causes of the false sense of quality. If your tester is the gatekeeper, that is bad. The whole team should care about quality. If you're playing a soccer game and everyone on the team leaves except for the goalie, do you think I think the other team's going to score, don't you? Even if it's the last couple minutes? It's just a bad strategy in soccer, football. It's a bad strategy in software development as well. Testing is not a thing that happens at the end. You cannot test quality in at the end. It's an old adage, but it is very true. If you're only talking about things at the end in terms of testing scope and all of that stuff, you've missed everything up to that point, which is the much less expensive things to change, but also you missed the opportunity to make something much better than the thing that you're throwing over the wall. Developers should be testing their own changes. Heck, developers should be testing other developers' changes. There's nothing wrong with that. I think making sure that everybody in the team understands quality expectations and they're participating in quality processes and they agree what those quality processes are, that's huge. That's the way that you work together for that common goal of a really great quality level. And then you aren't measuring the right things. So metrics have to be really meaningful. Otherwise, they're really not that all that wonderful. And we'll talk about that. Under the whole team is responsible for quality. I've hit on most of these things more. I've hit on most of these things at this time. I get very excited about these things, people. Okay. It's also important for there to be quality coaching. Testers can be quality advocates. They can explain how to look at things, how to test things, all of those things. A diverse team wins more. And by diverse here, I mean backgrounds. I mean dev, test, product, like areas, that kind of diversity. I mean folks that introverts and extroverts, like, I mean, the more diverse, the better, because you're going to come at the development process from all different angles, and your quality is going to reflect that. So instead of having, all the same minds get together, create something, and then give that over to test, if everybody's working on it like throughout, then you have a chance for all those opinions. You have a chance for those quality checks to be just a natural part of the team's DNA. When the whole team is responsible for quality, it is in the team's DNA, and that's a huge win. And once the team feels that way, that false sense of quality, that erodes it considerably, because it's not just on one person to try to do that at the end of something. And that's pretty critical. Okay. I really like the embedded tester model. And so we've already talked about, like, if something comes in at the end, it's expensive to fix. The feedback goes back and forth, and you've missed all these other opportunities. So the embedded tester model is a tester on a cross-functional project team. And basically what happens is they are involved in every team process. And so when the team forms, they create a quality plan, for example. This could also be a charter, could be a strategy. Terminology is more important, that everyone understands what you're saying versus the actual terms that you're using. But the whole team gets together and we say, this is what we're going to use for defect tracking. This is what we're going to use for documentation. This is our acceptance criteria, or this is our definition of done, or this is our release readiness. Whatever those processes look like, they're documented in a living, evolving form. So maybe a wiki page, maybe a Word doc, whiteboard, whatever works, Trello board, whatever works. And the whole team agrees these are the steps we're going to take. And that embedded tester is part of that team. So they're on implementation spec reviews. They might be on PR reviews, depending on what the need is and depending on what the tester background is. They are doing things like kickoffs. They're participating in kickoffs. They're on retros. They're on sprint planning. They're on story pointing if your team is doing that. The point is that they are involved in every single bit with that team. They're just part of the team. And that is, and to me, that's my favorite model because it really reduces that testing happens at the end, because there's all of this stuff that happens that prevents that. And so testing is happening incrementally throughout, and even like at the design stage, for example. And that really leads to some high quality work with the whole team bought into, these are the things that we think are important. And what's really great is when you have a whole team of embedded testers, they can collaborate and share what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and all of those things. So it's a very powerful, strong model, because you've got folks on cross-functional project teams, but then you also have a test team where they can share and collaborate around their discipline and figure out how to make things even better. Okay, next, additional testing tools you probably need. Quality plan. So we've already mentioned that. It could be quality plan, strategy, charter. It could just be, here's the checklist of things that our team has decided we're doing. And the biggest part of that too is including a shared vocabulary. I once went to a test conference and the speaker was fantastic. And he said, okay, who knows the definition of regression testing? And everyone went to raise their hand. And he asked a couple people, okay, what's your definition? What's your definition? Turns out their definitions were different. Turns out my definition was different than those two. It matters only to some extent what the definition of regression testing is, as long as in your organization, as long as where you work, everyone understands what that is and what it isn't. You can call it what it needs, whatever makes sense within reason. I mean, I'm oversimplifying something because there is a textbook definition of regression testing, but I just argue that the textbook definition of regression testing is less important than the team and your organization understanding what it is that the tester is doing or what it is that the team is doing. So integration testing, regression testing, end-to-end testing, smoke tests. Some of recently we had a whole discussion with a whole bunch of testers in a room, and we said, what should be in smoke tests? And it turned out there were a lot of different opinions, all very valid, but depending on where you've worked and what your background is, smoke testing may mean something different to you. And of course, again, there's the textbook version of what that is. Is there a puff of smoke when you plug it in, kind of that level of tests, but that can mean different things for different people. The important thing is agreement. The important thing is defining the vocabulary so people know what they're agreeing to. Test case management tools. There are so many different ways to organize things, and people hear test case management tool and they're like, oh, this is going to be heavy. The truth is, test case management tool could be a wiki page. It could be an Excel sheet, a Word doc. It's whatever makes sense for you and your organization. Now, you might be asking at this point, okay, well, we're talking about a false sense of quality, and it seems like now we're going into tools and all of this stuff. The reason that I bring these things up is because the more you need visibility, does everyone see what's going on? That's dashboards, reporting, defect and enhancement reporting. You also need clear communication. What's the risk? What are we concerned about? What are we working towards? And you need experts. And all of these things make that false sense of security smaller and smaller and smaller. So like as you start building things into your quality processes and building that understanding, well, it's a lot harder to think that your product is really awesome quality level if you have all these data points that tell you maybe something differently. And on the flip side, if all of your data points and everything else is telling you that like, yeah, we're trending in the right direction, well, that's a good feeling too, right? That's where you want to be. And you want to be able to point out the data specifically that tells you, yes, our quality level is high, and this is our expectation, and this is, we're proud of this. Okay. And then measuring. I'm not going to go into a lot of details on this, but you have to pick metrics that are important to you. So I always suggest review what's being measured. Do you already have defect reporting? So you already know what backlogs look like, or you already know what's being reported from the field, for example. You may already know what your CI/CD automated tests, what they look like in terms of pass fail. So take a look at what you already have, determine of those things that you already have, what is important, and then go from there. I think the biggest mistake with metrics is when people go all in on metrics and all of a sudden they've got a dashboard that shows like 20 things. Well, the truth is, if you start with 1 or 2 things and then you build up, you pretty quickly figure out like, okay, you had like, this is where we're going. This is interesting, as opposed to overloading people with data that they may not make sense of it. So if your end goal is let's measure the quality level, well, you might end up, you would have better success picking out 1 or 2 things that to you measure your quality level than to have everything recorded all the time. So some things to keep in mind, you might already be measuring some of these things, knowledge-based feedback. If people inside your company don't understand what something does, the people outside your company are not going to understand what it does. Product pain points, as tests, especially when you onboard new testers, is there something that people are always like, oh, that's really, I didn't understand that, or that's not clear, those types of things. Enhancement requests, oh, I'd really love it if this did this, or this would be really helpful. Sometimes it's specific, like to a specific role, but if you get an enhancement request internally, a lot of times it does indicate that it should at least be acknowledged. It also tells you that people that are working on the product inside are using the product, and they have, and they are so excited or interested or frustrated about something, they logged an enhancement request for it, which is very good, because it kind of tells you that the organization is either healthy and people are excited and want things to be more awesome, or the people are very frustrated, and that's something that you can actually take a look at, and metrics help with that. And gut feelings, that's a really squishy metric, but I go back to the example of if everybody feels that tests are flaky, or that another good one is like when people don't understand what test does and they're like, yeah, they just push buttons. The gut feel there is that maybe there needs to be some education around quality processes or what testers do. So gut feelings can be a squishy metric, but it's one that sometimes you can find other data to support it. Gut feels are great about telling you that there may be something there to explore and that there might be trends. And then what do we find internally and how early? That's a fairly easy metric, and it can really help with determining what kinds of things may need to be revamped in your quality processes. So if you pick 1 or 2 of those types of things, you'll get started with metrics, and they'll be valuable metrics. Okay, and I just lost my tab. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so we've talked about this, how to choose metrics. I have no idea how I'm doing on time, because we started a little shift. So I'm going to keep talking until someone tells me to stop talking or start answering questions. Choosing metrics. So choose metrics that you care about. I bet there's some people that are listening that have heard, yes, we have to have code coverage. We have to look at code coverage all the time. Well, turns out that if you Google code coverage and metrics, you're going to find a lot of people that think that they're the end all be all, and a lot of people that think that they're meaningless. I am not going to tell you which applies for your situation, but don't force a metric if it doesn't fit. And if it is a metric that's the end all be all, have at it. I'm all for like it. It's about, metrics are about what's valuable to you, your organization, what you're building.
ठीक है, चल बाय.
Does that mean I should? Okay, so now this is really the last slide. So I'm hoping that after this, I'm hoping that you can make some clear, honest decisions about your quality process and being open to change as you learn more and as tools mature. This is all, be curious, be willing to try out new tech, be willing to revisit old decisions, do all those things, and then the false sense of security, the false sense of quality significantly declines as long as you're open and honest and authentic.
That's great, Kate. We have a couple of questions as well.
Oh, great. Okay. How can the testing team? Oh, do you want me to read them or just respond to them in chat?
As you, I mean, you can take one, you can reply on chat. Oh, they keep coming. So you can pick one and answer it right now, and then we can probably.
Okay, I'll just answer the first one that I see. Let's see. How can the testing teams ensure high quality when the management develops with design as you go along? Oh, I could write significantly. So what I would say is, it's kind of like with the metrics and stuff, thinking incrementally. So if you want to build a quality of culture within engineering, you need to start with small steps that engineering and the business care about. So if you can show that getting involved earlier in the process has helped in this specific way, it's more likely that they'll see value in that, and that'll become part of the process. So it's really about showing value, making changes, showing more value, and really, doing some really good PR and marketing about those things and making a really good case for why it's important.
Great. I'll ask the team to copy the questions and put it into the chat so that you can later answer it at your own pace, right?
I can do it right after this, so no big deal at all.
Amazing. That's great. So thank you, Kate. Thanks for the wonderful talk. A big round of applause for you as well.